everyone. Welcome to the Light Gate. We have a really great show today, and I brought the wrong person in. Oh my God. So sit tight. Hold on a second. Where is he? Okay. Hi.
Out again. Yeah.
Okay, there you go. Sorry, that was fun. All right. Welcome to the Light Gate. We are broadcasting to you live from New Orleans on United Public Radio Network 107.7 FM and the United Paranormal Radio Network on 105.3 FM. We are on Roku, YouTube, Facebook, Tumblr, and a whole bunch of others. We want to welcome everybody. We want to let our Roku people know that we know you can't see us, you only hear us, and we will very much endeavor to make sure that you understand everything that's going on. We will describe everything. We have a great show tonight, and take it away, Preston.
Thanks, Dolly. Yeah, thanks everyone for joining us. I see a lot of familiar names in chat, so I just want to give a shout out to you guys because we love you so much and really want to thank you for coming here to listen to our show because we do have an amazing guest tonight. I'm excited. So I want to say hi to Brian. I see you're first in. Thank you very much. And here's Schizo Music TV. Hello. And here is Girl in the Desert. Let me know if you need a glass of water. And here's Dawn Curtis. Hello, Dawn. And here is Dana Matthews. Hi, Dana. Thanks for joining us. Lots of people here in chat. Very cool. Mr. B's Truth Seeker. You looks like you stepped out for a second, but hopefully you're back here. Let's see who else. Scuba Maru. Yay. Hi, Scuba Maru. Thanks for joining us. And I think I mentioned you already, Dana, didn't I? Dana Matthews?
Yes. Yeah.
Joel Durant. Thank you for joining us. Who else do we have here? W. Decker, Delta Tesseract. Oh, Louise, I recognize your name. Hello. And who else do we got going on here? Let's see. Ruth Kleiber. I got your name right this time. Thank you for letting me know. Chewy, hello. Hi, Janice Connett. Thanks very much for joining us. And here is Susan with us. Hi, Susan. Hope you're enjoying the new book. Thanks very much for your contribution. Let's see, who else? Christopher Harmon. Yay. Who else? Foggy Notions Podcast. Thanks for being here again. Always nice to see you. And here, of course, is Gray Troll. How are you doing, Gray Troll? Thanks for coming. And the lovely Chris Teen. Thanks, Christine Tyne. Yeah, let's see. Who else do we got here? Tools, thank you for joining us. Blue Sky, I'm jealous. Net rain. Oh, and who else do we have here? Michael Kennedy. Hey, Michael. Thanks for being here. Lots of lovely faces. Renee. I know you, Renee.
Hi, Renee.
So thanks for joining us. John P. Adventures. Here's Real Badger, who's always first on my YouTube videos. Thank you for that. And Terry D. Thank you for joining us. Gosh, we have quite a big crowd today. This is going to be very cool. Remember, guys, get your questions in early because it's hard to keep up with you guys. Oh, Rad Peanut. Hope you're doing well. I see you burnt your finger. I hope that's all right. Ouch. I hate burning myself. I hate it. Let's see who else do we have here. Raul Melendez. Thanks for joining us. Gosh, this is so exciting. So many of you guys. Allison Carr says hello from Florida. Dolly was originally from Florida, had lots of encounters there.
Yep.
I was there once. I saw the Everglades and alligators. It's very cool. Of course, I was 7. Let's see, who else do we have here? I'm not sure I can pronounce this. Evasius. First time watching live. Awesome. Welcome, Evasius. Thank you for joining us. CT Guitar Guy. Hola. ¿Qué tal? Bastante bien? Practicing my Spanish. Who else do we have here? Oh, wow. Flying Nun, all the way from Sydney. Awesome.
G'day, mate. Right.
And here is Debbie Majeski, who's excited for the show. We're excited to have you here, Debbie. Our guest is going to be so cool. I just love
Right.
this. Okay.
Don't forget Zach Dicast-Mansour.
Oh, I don't see him. Well, I could probably go on forever, so I'm probably just going to get started here. He's Deanna Chafin. Cooking dinner. I hope it's good. I love chicken nuggets, in case you have any. Yeah, we better get started because there's so many of you guys here. Oh, here's Zach Dicast-Mansour. So there you go. And UFO Bigfoot. And One Our Wedding. Hello. Thanks for being here. El Prophet. I hope you enjoyed the schoolyard video. That's just part 1, by the way. Part 2 is even better. Manuel Silva. Thank you for joining us. Okay, I think we better just start.
Yes.
One more. Because I want to say hi to Nancy Thames. She's so lovely. Hi, Nancy.
Nancy.
Okay, let's get started. Because our guest is amazing. He is a true pioneer in this field. I've known him for a while. I mean, he has been a podcaster, and I was on his podcast. Certainly knew about his books before that. But tonight, on episode 15 of The Light Gate, we are super happy to welcome researcher, author, and experiencer Mike Clelland. Now, Mike has quite an interesting resume. He's actually an expert in ultralight backpacking and all kinds of wilderness topics. He's the author and illustrator of a series of instructional books on advanced outdoor techniques, all kinds of stuff from cooking, how to climb, how to survive in the wilderness, packing, of course, and more. But he is also a UFO researcher and is having a huge effect on this field. He's the author of the very highly praised book, The Messengers, in which he explores the mysterious connections between owls, synchronicity, and UFO abductions. I am so excited to talk about this. This is a unique book. There's a lot of researchers out there who are basically doing rehashes of Roswell, which, don't get me wrong, I love Roswell, but it's a bit of a dead horse. And Mike Clelland's stuff is brand new, unexplored territory. And he's the only one looking into it. So this whole owl connection is very cool. And it's not only other stories from people all over the world that he has interviewed and documented their accounts, but also his own first-hand experiences with these elusive effects, which were actually the foundation of his research. And besides The Messengers, which is a best-selling book, by the way, he has written the companion book, Stories from the Messengers, which continues his research into the owl connection, and also Hidden Experience, about his own personal experiences, which are quite extensive. And as he says, and I'll just quote him directly here, I wrote about the most difficult time of my life as it was happening and posted it on a blog. I'd been confronted with a chain of strange events that all pointed to one thing, and I was forced to ask myself, am I a UFO abductee? I think a lot of us go through that journey at one point. I know Dolly certainly did, being a experiencer herself. But most recently, Mike Clelland has written the novel, The Unseen. We're going to definitely talk about that. It's a paranormal thriller about a town full of mysteries and secrets, ghosts and premonitions, and all sorts of cool stuff. So he's quite accomplished. I was counting his books. It's, I think, more than 30, if I counted correctly.
Wow.
So he has, a lot of books. So he's also a podcaster, hosted The Unseen on Whitley Strieber's Unknown Country website for a while, and has, of course, appeared on all the major podcasts, such as Coast to Coast and pretty much everyone you can name. And, of course, ours, The Light Gate, episode 15. So super honored and delighted to have him here, and I will just bring him in right now.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Thanks very much.
We're excited.
Yeah, it's a true honor to have you on, because I do consider you a researcher's researcher, not just someone who's, rehashing stories we've heard before. there are books out there that are about Travis Walton's case. They're just kind of lifting it from everything that's been already published. But your stuff is brand new. So
Well, to be fair, Whitley Strieber covered it extensively, and other people certainly have touched on the owl thing. So it was not, I didn't discover the owl UFO connection, but I certainly, how to say this, I certainly got super obsessed with it and like really took it to, like I really took it seriously, and how to say this, like I only pulled on that one little thread of the owls, and
Wow.
I kind of expected it to peter out and just have like I felt like I could write a really good magazine length article and be
Right.
done with it. And that's not what happened. I ended up writing, well, you can get right down to it's actually kind of 4 books, but 3 books on the nonfiction end of it. And well, you must know what this is like to be receiving stories, and you just receive story after story after story. And I'm just one person. I can't keep up. And the people who are contacting me, the people who contact me have had experiences for the most part. There's little variations in there, but people with UFO and owl experiences, those 2 things co-joined, and oh my word, the stories are so rich and so strange. It feels like well, you must know there's like the high strangeness aspect to these events, and this almost
for sure.
like they take on a sort of dream-like quality or a mythic quality sometimes, and the owl stories certainly seem to personify and they represent in those high strangeness cases in many ways. So it's been just really rewarding to have that one thread that I've been pulling on. And if I got to the end of the thread and I felt like it was done and the subject was talked out, I'd just move on. But that's not what it feels like. It feels like it's a bottomless pit, really.
Yeah, well, it's amazing because the book itself is about synchronicities. To have people coming at you, because of course, I reviewed the book. It's amazing to see all the synchronicities involved, and the fact that people are coming to you synchronistically, which is certainly, as you said, something I've experienced. People coming at you with their stories. So it's got layers and layers to it.
Oh, and that's what I tried to explore in the second book in a way. Now you must recognize this too. Like, so you talk to someone, a witness, and you have the conversation, and then there's do you know Bill Konkoleski? He's a MUFON. He works for MUFON, Michigan.
No, I don't
Well,
think
so he's a wonderful guy, but he has a story which is so funny. He'd go to a party, so he works for MUFON. He's had his own experiences, very open with his own experiences. He's written 2 books about his own personal experiences, and so he'd go to parties, and the people that didn't really know him, and they'd kind of come up to him and say, "So, Bill, what's up with your like this UFO stuff? I hear you're into this UFO thing. What's that all about?" And his wife would sort of step in front of him and tell the person, "You got 6 hours?" She would say, like, "You got 6 hours to hear this? Because you're not going to hear the story unless you like dedicate a real chunk of time." And that's what I find is like, it feels like everyone, not everyone, but many of the people who contact me, it feels like they have their own like novel is unwritten, and it just goes on and on, and one synchronicity layers on top of another, and so you start pulling on these threads, and you never quite, like, it's almost impossible to tell the story because there's hard to know where it begins and ends, and really.
Yeah,
So it's
really
been
noticed that.
fascinating.
Yeah, because I interviewed most people about the UFO experiences, and they're like, "Do you want to hear the spiritual side, the paranormal side?" I'm like, "Are you kidding?" Because some people, I've known researchers who kind of edit that stuff out. They're very nuts and bolts.
I'm curious, did you ever study owls in particular and learn anything about them in particular?
Me?
Yes.
Oh gosh, yeah. Oh yeah. Like what? Like physically about the owls?
Yes.
Oh yeah, owls are remarkable animals. They, just as far as the physiology of an owl, there's just this new book that came out, and I want to get it, but it's all about the science of the owl. And but was studies that were done, I think, in the 1980s, where they put owls in a totally black barn. They had a big giant room, and they made it totally 100% light tight, so now no light could get in the room.
Right.
And the owls had flown around it, so they knew where to land in the rafters and where to land on the floor. They could fly around the room without any light at all, just having memorized the shape of the room. And then they would let a mouse in on the floor. Total darkness, nothing to see. The mouse would make a noise, and the owls would hit the mouse 75% of the time, no light at all, only going by sound. And if they increase the light minimally, just barely, like
It was 100% of the time.
we couldn't perceive it at all.
Right.
And then it would hit the mouse 100% of the time.
Yeah.
And so they can do all of their hunting. So the owls fly at night through the forest in what we would call complete darkness. They have night vision that allows them to see it just like they were flying through in the day. And so they listen for the mice as they fly.
Right.
So they're not looking for the mice. They're listening to the sound of the mouse on the forest floor. So that's amazing to me that they would fly in almost complete darkness, listening for a mouse on the forest floor.
I wanted to add something in for you that you've probably never learned about them because the scientific community won't give you the information. And this I learned through ET and my experiences. Owls are just like most animals. They have electromagnetic sensor in their foreheads as well, in their nose, in the top of their mouth. And their faces are constructed so they're almost like a parabolic dish.
Mm-hmm.
They magnify sound as it's coming in. So sound is really important to them as well. But their hearing has to be acute as well, as far as their perceiving.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the ranges that they hear in is they hear electromagnetic pulse. And everybody has one. You, me, every animal in the world has an electromagnetic pulse. And in total pitch blackness, they can zero that. And what's interesting to me about this, and I went through this because I was seeing owls all the time as a kid, and I never could figure out why. And it's because they hear them coming. They know they're there, and they show up for it because they think it's one hell of a flock of birds or small animals on the ground because it's that kind of a pulse that they hear. And
so they're hearing the pulse of what would be the UFO craft.
Of the craft, yes, absolutely. They know it's there.
Yeah.
I've learned to be warned by it. In other words, when I start seeing owls, I know that they're around.
Well, I spent the first, so it's very interesting. I spent the first, few chapters of the book speculating on exactly that. Where I speculated that the owls are certainly highly attuned receptors of whether it's light energy or sound energy. Right. And I speculated, I didn't say it's true, but I said, can the owls hear something that we can't hear, that we haven't defined yet? In essence, is the UFO a giant dog whistle that only the owls can hear? And
you put
so
it
you're
eloquently.
saying,
I love that way you said it. Yes, they were a giant dog whistle. Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, we interviewed Linda Zimmerman, who just wrote a book about UFOs and animal reactions. She was talking about this sort of thing as well.
Oh, Linda Zimmerman from the Hudson Valley, New York.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. She's amazing. But before we get into the whole topic of owls and messengers, I always like to start out with a person's childhood because I'm very curious how someone is drawn into this field, which is so, unique and kind of a niche field, even though now it's exploding. So I'm just wondering how it was for you. Were you a skeptic as a kid? Had you seen UFOs? Because I know you've talked about some of your own experiences with the UFO phenomena itself. I'm just wondering how it all began for you.
Well, I was sort of a quirky kid, and I would draw cartoons and stuff like that. And so when I was 12 years old, so I had two events when I was 12 years old. And let me tell you, as an adult and growing up, I managed to just okay, I'm gonna push that away. I could tell the story. I could tell the story all my life. I could tell these stories, but let me tell you, I was I'm not going there. I'm not going there with what the implications are. So one story was I was at a friend of mine. His name is Kenny, and I was at his house, and it was a sleepover. 12 years old, two boys, and I can't remember if it was him or me, but we were in his room and looking out the window. It was nighttime. One of us kind of went, look, and we went right up against the glass. So it feels like people said, could have been a reflection of something behind the glass. I'm like, no way. We were right up against the glass. And it looked like, what do I have here? It looked like a coffee can. This is a water bottle, but it looked like a coffee can, like a cylinder in the sky. So it would have been about half this length. And it was rotating at this very odd, very controlled way. And it was, so you can see it's descending. Actually, would have been descending like this.
Okay.
At the same time it was rotating, and we watched it for 30 seconds or so, and then it disappeared. Poof, gone. And It's funny. One of the questions I ask people when they describe, like I used to say, here, let me back up a little bit. I used to say the lights turned out and we couldn't see it anymore. And I always knew I was lying because I was afraid to say it disappeared. It was just too fantastical, right?
Okay.
So that's like, it would have sounded like I was making up the story or exaggerating or something. So I just said the lights turned off and we couldn't see it anymore, but it disappeared. And I'm totally content saying that now because I've read so many accounts where that matches. But and then we ran downstairs and we had pens and paper, and his mom was at the kitchen table, and we drew it.
Oh, wow.
We drew the craft, and I still have the image of it that I drew. I've since done an updated version with Photoshop, and it's very clear and slick looking. But it was interesting to because I contacted Kenny like 30 years later, and he did not remember the night.
Oh, no.
And then we said, oh, okay, I was just wondering, just wanted to check in. And so he called me a few days later and he said, you know what? I talked to my mom. She remembers the night we came downstairs and drew the thing on the kitchen when we were all sitting around the kitchen table. And when we came down and drew it, she remembers us drawing it right after it happened. So that's a smaller form of confirmation, but I thought that was really interesting. And then, so also when I was 12 years old, and I mean, you don't have to, you can read into this. I was walking home from a high school football game, and I was with a friend. His name was also Mike, and we got to a spot in the sidewalk in my neighborhood. This is in the suburbs of Detroit in the autumn in 1974. And it was, this was kind of Leave It to Beaver land. It was completely safe suburbs. There was no worries about like locking your doors or anything like that. So, and leaving the high school football game to my house was, I don't know, less than half a mile. Pretty quick walk. And I was going to be home at 9:30. I said, because I wanted to see a television show. Do you remember the show Kolchak, the Night Stalker?
I do, with Darren McGavin.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. I was the perfect age. I was the perfect age
Love
to just
that
love
show,
that
yeah.
show. Yeah, because they did have a UFO episode, but they had zombies and werewolves and vampires and stuff. But so I was going to be home in time to see that show, and so there was a spot on the sidewalk. I remember vividly exactly where we're standing in the neighborhood, and then the sky lit up like click. The whole sky lit up orange, click, went right back to the night sky. Just like orange, normal. And there was no noise. And it was a weird, rich orange. It felt like the entire sky just changed. And then when we both did the thing, we're like, what just happened? What happened? We're like, what? And we did the little thing, like, could have been like an explosion over the horizon. Was it lightning? It was a totally calm night. There was no reason for lightning. Could it have been like, the like maybe like two wires touched on a telephone pole and zapped, but there was no noise. And then I got home and my friend Mike lived a little further in the neighborhood. So I just went into my house and he walked to his house a few blocks away all alone. And when I walked in the house, my parents were waiting for me and they were angry. And they're like, what are you doing out so late? I'm like, I'm not out late. It's 9:30. I knew exactly when I left the football game. I want to see this show. And the 11 o'clock news was ending, so that put it at around 11:30. So it's rough to know exactly, but I would say between an hour and a half to 2 hours of missing time. There was no missing time. No one knew what that word meant. I was completely baffled. You know what? It was weird. My parents were angry at me, and I felt like it felt like I didn't do anything wrong, and it was a really tough. Like, why are you angry at me? I know I left the high school football game at 9:30. And then to get home at 11:30 was very strange. Now, the next Monday at school, I talked to Mike about it. And you said no swearing, so I can't quote him exactly.
Okay.
But I said, we saw something weird. Like we were with other people and said, yeah, Mike, and we saw something weird on Friday night. And he said, yeah, we saw a UFO with lights and everything. And I was like, I never saw a UFO. I saw the sky turn orange. And I've since reached out and found him. He doesn't remember the night, but he remembers that I got in trouble that night for being home, which is a
That's interesting.
detail. Yeah.
So did you dream about it or anything, or any indication of any aftermath to it in any way?
You know what was weird? This is a funny story. And so all my life I could tell the story about the missing time. And then I could also tell a totally separate story about the orange flash. I could tell a story about coming home and my parents being mad at me because I was out late, and I could tell a story about an orange flash. And then I watched. This was back in VHS, and I rented a VHS cassette from the gas station in my town. It had a little rack, so I rented the very first episode of the X-Files. And at the end of the episode, they had the interview with Chris Carter, and they, now Noah, it was like a little promotional thing. They included an interview with him, and he started the interview by saying, "When I was a kid, there was a television show that I loved called Kolchak the Night Stalker," and when he said that, like these two stories that I had always kept separate went, they totally like glued together in my mind. Like I was realizing, oh, this was the same story. It was the same story all the time. How did I not remember? How did I remember it as two different events? And then as like, I must have been, I don't know, almost 40 when the two memories came together. Let me tell you, when that happened, I had such a strong emotional reaction, like total emotional reaction of like panic and fear from Chris Carter saying, my favorite TV show as a kid growing up was Kolchak the Night Stalker, was like super emotional to me. So that emotion told me something.
Yeah.
Oh, go on.
In your lifetime, have you ever seen anything that produces a light, that color, UFO type of light?
You know what's the closest thing to that light is when you have a campfire and the coals die down, and it's that rich orange, that rich,
Preston,
glowing, vibrant orange.
Show them Talata.
Oh, well, it's going to take me a while to pull that up, but I will do what I can.
But so even now, like whatever, 45 years later, when I see like a campfire or the coals burning down in a stove, like I'm like, that's the color of that thing. It had that rich, self-illuminated, glowing, vibrant
Talata is very
orange.
active in Michigan in the 70s. Okay,
What was?
He's always stayed active. This is my contact.
Okay.
The craft that I know, and he presents with a very orange light. Orange. He'll set the whole place ablaze in this fire color of orange. And I have a really clear picture of him, and I want you to see it. Okay. You can't see the entire craft, but his light, his leader light, is so bright, and it literally looks like he's on fire. And
it was really jarring because it's not like the orange of a sunset, it's not like the orange of like,
right. It will light up everywhere that you're at. And if he's coming down to look at you and he comes in fast, that's what you'll see. You'll see a flash of bright orange light.
In Michigan?
Yes, the Midwest, whole Midwest. Yeah.
And, okay, where did you live in Michigan ever, or?
No, but my experiences were involved with the Midwest. No, not that one, the other one. With his leader light on. He's dropping drones right there. By the way, the drone that you saw, and it was a drone, see the bottom part of that light hanging down? It's a cylinder. That's it.
Okay.
That's what you saw. He would have dropped that drone.
That's the only orange one that I could find, Dolly. I'm not sure which one.
The one of the ship where it's just a single light in the tail.
All right. Well, we'll have to.
I'll send it to you. Okay.
Okay. Thanks.
All right. So those were your two experiences. Did that change your way of thinking at all? I mean, were you just into the sort of normal 12-year-old things at that time, or did that
Well, I was certainly, there was like, on TV and documentaries, and there was a Time Life book series that were out, and I could get those from my junior high school library, and I certainly remember reading the UFO thing. What it did is, so after that, you would read a UFO account, right, and would say, oh, the farmer saw something land in his field, and, and the craft was there, and I was like, well, like, I saw something. Like, I'm not lying. Like, why? So I took the stories very seriously. But I'll tell you what, I also did this thing where I was like, I'm not going all the way. I'm gonna like, and that changed at a certain point. But wow, I was especially when I started reading the abduction stuff and missing time showed up, and I mean, in the lexicon. And when I read my first missing time thing, it was like, nope, not going there. Like something happened to someone else, but not me. So.
All right. Well, I'm going to pull up another picture. I don't know if you sent it to me or not, but I'm going to pull up. I think this might be the one you're talking about.
Messenger. Okay.
Oh, you did send it?
Yes, in Messenger.
All right. Well, let me just
That's
put.
not the picture I want you to see. There's the leader light on the on. That's the cylinder. That's the cylinder. That picture makes it look like it's the middle is missing, but it's not. It's a whole drone. And
Mhm.
when they fly sideways because they're skiffing the magnetic lines around, and
Okay.
so they fly on the side. Okay, do the other one, Preston.
All right. It's going to take me a second, so
All right.
I just need to pull it up and put it into a folder here. So
Okay.
keep talking.
Oh, okay. So I had one more experience. This was as a 30-year-old. So you were
Okay.
asking was like as a child, as a boy, like, yeah, I had experiences that implied, like, I mean, I definitely saw a unknown craft in the sky, physical looking craft that disappeared, did something that a physical thing should not be able to do.
Right.
And then I also had the experience of the missing time, which, wow, did I manage to shut that out and turn it into two separate stories. And then, here, let me just add one more thing. So the house, I'll tell this roughly because there's someone's private. So the house, the X on the sidewalk, right? I could have put an X on the sidewalk right where it happened. It was in front of a friend of mine. It was a girl that I went to kindergarten with. Her name is Cindy.
Mhm.
And I, in 2009, I was gonna put this story up on my blog. I'd started my blog. My blog was only about synchronicities, which I've had a lot of. So I had a lot of synchronicities. So I was gonna put this story up on the blog. It's an interesting story, right? We had missing time, and so, but wow, did I know the implications of it? So I was like, oh, do I put this on the blog? And so you know, when you write something up, you have like the image, and I had the article was all written, and I had put in a picture. I had found her house on Google Maps and drawn an X on the sidewalk. So I had that image ready to go.
Oh,
And I
okay.
had my hands above the keyboard, and it was like at nighttime, and I was like, I can't do it. I can't push the button. I can't. And in the moment that I basically said, I am a coward, I am not brave enough to
Oh,
put this up online, in that moment, I get a ping on my email, and it said Cindy, and it gave her last name. Cindy wants to be your friend on Facebook. Cindy from that house. I hadn't talked to her in 38 years.
Wow.
That moment to like ping me.
there you go.
Yeah. So it was like, it was the moment I said, I am not brave.
You know, wow.
Ping. She
You were
emails me.
broadcasting like crazy.
Yeah.
You realize that you're really pretty psychic. Synchronicities in your life are a direct arrow pointing straight at that ability. Okay, you're doing things with your ability, and it's causing you to see it as synchronicities when it's really just you.
Well,
Okay.
here's what I'll tell you. So this is very common for me. So I did a podcast with a fellow named Juan. He does a podcast called Juan on Juan. It was a really good show. It was a great podcast.
Okay.
And he so we had set the date up. So we were going to be interviewing the next day. So that night, the night before, he's with his wife and son. And the son is like 7 or 8. The son is little, and they're in the backyard. And he's saying, you know, I'm interviewing the owl guy tomorrow. Looking around the yard. Maybe we'll see an owl. And his son goes, Dad, look. And a glowing orange orb floats through their backyard.
Wow. Cool. Preston, show the pic. You've got it up. I can see
Yeah,
it.
I've got the pic. Yep. That's the one, right?
It's not a perfect justice of what you're talking about. When you're up close and personal with it, it is fireball orange like that.
Yeah.
And it lights up everything around it.
Okay, so
That's
so
just
my
legal life.
memory, which I fully suspect that my memory has been altered somehow, is that the sky lit up, like just click, the whole sky lit
Yep.
up like a planetarium dome of one color,
Right.
that rich orange,
Yep.
and then click, it lasted.
Yeah. He can
Less
turn
than
that
click,
light
click.
on and off and totally disappear right in front of you.
Yeah.
He turns off anything that is reflective, all of it, and he blends into the background instantly, and he'll take off. And so that's why you think they're disappearing. They're not just going into nothingness. They're literally leaving your view. He's taken away all light from himself, so you can't perceive it in the night sky at all.
Mm-hmm.
They can do it in the daytime too. I mean, they can. It's amazing what they can do. But yeah,
Oh yeah, no, I've talked to many
Yeah.
accounts of just
right.
fantastical, if things changing shape. It starts out as a little ping pong ball, turns into a giant,
Right.
cylinder
He
the
can do
size
that
of a
too.
bus. Yeah.
He can make that light as little or as big as he wants.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Yep. Wow. So are those the only three contacts that you've had that remember, or?
How long do we have? How long is the show? So yeah, well, so let me here's like, this book is 370 pages, and this is like, there's a lot going on in this book. So there's some things that sure imply UFO contact that I've had. Yeah. So I got a lot. Yeah. I mean, not as much as some people, but enough that like that little thing I said, oh, I'm not going there. Like, no, so like I realized fully, oh, I'm involved somehow. What that might mean, I'm still at a loss to what it might mean, but I do feel there's been some ongoing set of events.
That's amazing.
All my life.
So I know that journey because I came into this field as a complete skeptic, and at some point started having sightings, and they started interacting with me. Then I started getting little messages and stuff, and so.
But you were also doing out of body work, weren't you?
Yes, that kind of came hand in hand.
I'm going to say, yeah.
So actually, I don't think it's that odd. I think that's actually the pattern we see now that I've, interviewed enough people.
Oh, I agree. There's like a blurry, fuzzy line, like where does UFO subject end and where does the out of body thing, where does the near death experience begin? Where does the psychic abilities? Yeah. So. Yeah.
So here,
it seems like it's all one. They're all joined somewhere in the middle there. Oh, there. Yeah.
This is the big book on owls, synchronicity, and the UFO abductee. So this is an amazing book because it's so chock full of separate little accounts that it builds this sort of amazing picture that when you first started, it's like, this is interesting. But as the stories start stacking up, it's mind-blowing what you've discovered with all of this. It will change the way you think about owls and the whole subject of UFO contact in general.
Well,
So
that was what I was finding because my direct experience. So to tell this story properly, I'll try to tell this quick because I've told this story a lot, but it takes up the first few pages of the book, where the very first opening story is. It just goes right into it. It just says, owls burst into my life in a flurry of weirdness in 2006. And I went on a camping trip. So 2006, that's like 17 years ago now, I think. So
Wow.
I was 44 at the time. And I was living in a small town in Idaho, right near Grand Teton National Park, right near Yellowstone National Park. And let me just turn the lights on. So I was working for an outdoor school, and I was camping a lot, doing a lot of camping, a lot of lightweight camping. I was super, super dedicated to it. And I met this woman in the town, and she was like living right there with the Tetons in the backyard, and she never went camping. Like, what do you never went camping?
Wow.
I'll take you camping. So this is like
God.
a total stranger. I'll take you camping. And it's just like, okay. So we went on a first date, which was like camping in like the big peaks. And we didn't take a tent. It was going to be a beautiful night. So I was like, oh, let's just go without a tent. And so we just went for one night. We left in the afternoon, came back. It was before lunch when we got back the next day. But where we lived, we could get really deep in with this would have been late summer. And, so the very first night, the very first thing, so you have to tell the story properly. I'm going to give you these details that have been so important to me. And I would argue that there are certain nuts and bolts researchers that would just not even write these details down. Like, that's not important. But wow, is it important personally to me? So we're sitting on a rock, big flat rock, and I'm making dinner on a little camp stove. And I'm talking, her name is Kristen. We're still good friends. And she's telling me the story. She's talking it when I'm like, wow, this is great. Like, you're really smart. Like, there's a depth to you that I didn't expect. And I was like, wow. And at the moment I was like, I'm impressed. We were talking about spiritual stuff. This owl flies over, right over both of us, and then another owl, and then a third owl. And for the next couple hours, these three owls are like flying around us. Wow. And we literally, like, at a certain point, it's bear country, right? So you pack up your food, and we walked another 15 minutes on the trail, and then found a nice spot to sleep. No tent. We just laid our sleeping bags down in the field of wildflowers and looked up at the beautiful night sky. So we're laying down, and the owls followed us. So you lay down and look up at the night sky. This is Northern Rockies with like no light pollution. The biggest town is like hundreds and hundreds of miles away. and these owls would swoop right in front of our faces without making any noise. They'd fly totally silently, and they would just like blot out the stars for just a half a second. It was so cool. And so the next day we were like, wow, that was great. Let's go camping again. She's like, yeah, let's do it again. So 4 days later, we went camping again, different part of the mountains. Sun is setting. 3 owls come and fly around us again. Same person, different part of the mountains. I'm convinced it's the same 3 owls. There's no way I can prove it, but I'm convinced it's the same 3 owls. So, and they're little owls. These aren't screen memories. These were little 10-inch owls, and they were cute, and they were flying around. And before they kind of stayed on a branch way over there. They kind of flew over us kind of high. But wow, let me tell you this second time, Kristen, this owl stood at our feet and looked up at us. So a little owl, like an adorable little cute owl with big black, with big eyes, and just like. And I looked over at Kristen, and her expression was like she was astonished. She was like, oh my gosh, this is the coolest thing ever. So to have it happen once was like kind of cool, but to have it happen twice just kind of blew my mind. So I got so obsessed with the owl thing. Here, let me back up half a step here. Both times, I did not say this at the time. I'm saying it now. I'm like kind of letting it all out. I've kind of tried to dedicate myself to take, just like, I'm going to say as much as I can. There's some stuff that happened privately between me and other people, and those people haven't given me the permission, so I don't tell those stories. But both nights, looking at those real owls, there was a voice in my head. I'm looking at a little owl, cute owl, standing in front of me and Kristen, and there's a voice in my head that said, "This has something to do with the UFOs." And it was like, is it my voice? Is it like I knew about the owl thing through reading communion and such, but I was like,
your higher consciousness was making itself known instantly to you. That's it.
So
You're
what?
telling yourself.
So there's no UFO in the story except for the voice in my head.
Right.
And
That's
after
amazing.
that, like I started, two things happened. That thing where I broke that through that wall, and I started looking into my own UFO experiences. I was living in Idaho at the time. I reached out to Leo Sprinkle at the time.
Oh, love
He
him.
was so
Yeah.
wonderful. Yeah, he died 2 summers ago. I think it was a little over a year ago. And it was such a so I would meet with these. So Leo would say, "Oh, there's a person you should talk to. Here, I'll give you their number." And I would call this person up, and then that person would say, "You should talk to this other person." So it was very quick, and I was like, I just needed to talk to people. So I would be reaching out to these people, and these people were wonderful as far as giving their time. Excuse me. And I would ask everyone the same question. Have you had any odd experiences with owls? And it wasn't everyone, but I'll tell you, a lot of people, especially at the beginning, so it felt like 100% at the beginning, would say, that's really interesting. I have the weirdest story about an owl, and no one's ever asked me that story. So they'd tell me the story, and I'd kind of write it down, and I started building up these files of these weird owl stories, and that eventually became the big fat book. But so I started the blog, and the very first story I put on the blog, or on the very first day or so, I put the story that I just told about Kristen in the mountains with the owls. A really magical story, the owls.
There's more to that story that's in the book.
Yeah.
There's some really interesting details that you glossed over a little bit, but go on.
So when I put it on the blog, I realized, like, I wrote it. Kristen was talking about something so interesting, and I was impressed. And then the first owl showed up, and I was like, so I called her up. I'm like, Kristen, what were you talking about the very first night? The very first owl showed up.
This is the part, yeah.
And she said, I was giving my most heartfelt definition of what God means to me.
Wow.
And I was like, so how to say this? I'm not like particularly churchy. Like, I haven't gone to church since I was like 12 or something. So, but I certainly recognize the sort of mythic power of that statement. Right. I mean, I know that just the term God, whatever. So that has happened to me a lot, where people will be talking about God, and either an owl will enter the scene or a UFO will enter the scene. And I've got a lot of
I'm
stories.
gonna have to. I want to pop in this comment.
Oh,
'cause it's
please.
from Janice Conant, who talks about her owl experience. She says, I had a white owl come up to my car window 3 times as I was going to start the car, just after I received my Reiki mastership.
Has
gives
she
me
read my
chill.
book?
I don't know, Janice. Have you? Because that's exactly what you're talking about.
So here's a weird thing. This is so. Can you ask Janice? If she's watching the show, has she had any sort of what she might call UFO interaction or UFO contact? So in my research, this is like, people say you can't share this information. This is like, that's your private research. You can't share this. What are you talking about? I can't share this information. Here's what happens. Yeah. I talk to people on the phone, right? So I got a clipboard on my desk and I talk to people on the phone all the time. So here's my clipboard, and someone calls me up, or, I say, hey, thanks for the email. Let's talk. So I call them up, and then I write just a few things. I write their phone number on the piece of paper and a few things, because if they ever contact me again, I want to be able to go back to this piece of paper and say, oh, we talked on this date, and you're the one that had the story. And I just write a few details down so I remember their story. But in the corner of every time I do this, I write Reiki. I just write Reiki in the corner, and I just wait,
Every single time.
Well, I write it before they even say it, and then it's not 100%, but I would argue. I might be wrong. I might be more, but I would say that 50% of the people who contact me who have a co-joined owl and UFO experience are doing Reiki therapy. 50%. Right. I'll tell you, 50% of the general population. I read your note. Thank you, Janice. Yes. So 50% of the normal population, they're not Reiki healers. I would argue 50% of the people who are having UFO and owl experiences who contact me are that's the only data I can sift through, is the direct data that I find myself. So yes, tell her, Janice, find me. You can just Google UFO owls and the first thing that comes up. So,
and your links are also in the show notes. So
good. So, so to me, that is a weird detail. You wrote the book on UFOs and healings, right? So the Reiki people are healing if they're having UFO and owl experiences. It's not the UFOs and owls that are healing the patient, but it feels like they're putting the zap on people and they're becoming Reiki healers.
No, they're waking them. It's the people are waking up. They're psychic. You're psychic. It almost becomes a compulsion to start helping people. That's a marker for contactees. They'll either go into service to help people somehow or heal people. They become holistic. It's amazing. When you wake up and you start hearing the truth about everything, it's a natural progression of your self. That's what happens. We're all capable of healing, all of us. Some of us, as we're waking up, really delve deeply into it, and it's just natural process. So I'm not surprised to hear you say that. It's kind of makes me feel better. More people are talking about it now. You can almost expect to be able to do that, out of nowhere.
So so just Facebook, like I have a bunch of friends on Facebook, and I know who's the people who've had UFO contact.
Yeah.
And this is anecdotal. Like, I haven't hired a team of statisticians and lie detectors or anything like that to figure this out. But people have UFO contact, they volunteer at the animal shelter.
Yes.
Like that's a pattern I've totally seen. I mean, other people can volunteer at the animal shelter too, but it's, I certainly recognize it a little more in the people who.
I always ask that now. I'm like, what's your relationship to animals?
Oh, how interesting.
Like, well, they call me the horse whisperer.
Oh, yeah.
They call me Snow White.
Snow White. I get Snow White a lot.
Yeah.
You know what I can do is I can like, I show up at someone's house and they have a cat, and the owner will say, oh, that cat's not going to come out. That cat doesn't talk to that cat. 30 seconds later, I can have the cat in my lap on its back purring, and I can be rubbing its stomach.
Definitely contacting. Yeah.
That happened to me. I walked into the house. The cat came up to me and stood on its hind legs and shook my hand. I'm not kidding. The owner was like, what is going on? I'm like, I don't know.
When I was a little kid and we were living out in the Everglades, all the animals that were hurt or needed help or starving always showed up at our property. And my dad would just watch it happen. And they ended up building, like environments for me to put them all in to heal them and make them well and send them off. And I lived in the Everglades, so I was real close to the rangers out there. And one of them finally said to me, because I was calling them, where do I put this? Can you help me put it back in nature? And they said, you want to join the STEP program? And I said, what is that? And he said, the Student Park Ranger program. I'm like, oh, yeah, let me do that. And I did. And I was constantly doing that all the time. And they called me Mama Doolittle because animals that are wild will come up to me and just, hang out with me and let me deal with them and stuff. And I thought that was just particular to the Glades. I went out through my life and it became a thing. I mean, I'm like, there's a sign over my head, I swear. Animals just come to me all the time, and I'm always picking something up and taking care of it, or I can handle almost any animal situation there is. I even became a zookeeper.
All the time. I interviewed a guy who hated dogs and cats, had a UFO encounter. Of course, they've started following him around. Now he does have a cat. It's a thing. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, Mike.
So you know who had a pet owl that he rescued? That was a rescue owl?
Who?
Kenneth Arnold.
Oh,
Kenneth
really?
Arnold. Kenneth Arnold, the guy who coined the term UFO or flying saucer from 1947, had a pet owl.
There you go.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
That's a sign right there.
Yeah.
I'm going to pop this up from
Gotta make a
Zach
banner of
Diecast
those owls.
answer. He says, my grandmother had a thing for owls and owl miniatures and other owl things all over her house. It creeped me out.
Owls have a heavy vibe to them. They're not. It's not like bunny rabbits. Yeah, owls. Yeah. So.
Yeah. So, have you looked? I'm sure you have, into the whole mythology and.
Oh yeah.
Owls,
the mythology of the owl, it's different everywhere, right? But the kind of key thread that runs through everything is that especially the ancient mythologies, that the owl can fly in the forest in complete darkness, right? So we as Westerners, and we know about, scientists can say, well, they're evolutionarily adapted with their big eyes and their cones and rods, and they have a way of taking in minimal light. But ancient man didn't know that. They thought it was magic that the owl could fly into the night, which I'm totally content with that word. It is magical. The owl is a magical animal. Maybe some scientist out there is cringing and his toes are curling in his shoes, but the owl is magical. So the mythology is, so the owl would fly into the night, and that became a synonym or a metaphor for flying into the land of the dead, for flying into the land of the ancestors, for flying to that other realm, for that shadow realm, so the unconscious, for the dream realm. So the owl would fly into this other realm, and the next step is the owl would return. And would return with the message. I have so many. What was happening when I was getting accounts, people would tell me these powerful, mystical owl stories. And they would say, oh, the owl landed on the fence post in the backyard. And then they would continue the story and say, well, and then the messenger put this voice in my head, I knew my grandfather was fine in heaven, or whatever the message might be. And then they just instantly went from calling it an owl to calling it a messenger.
Wow.
This was long before the book was even an idea in my head. I saw this pattern. So it was very easy to call the book The Messengers. So that's the ancient mythology. That's the old mythology. That's, from the dawn of man. Present day, Harry Potter has an owl that delivers the mail. Yep. It delivers the mail. It's perfect. It is the messenger. It delivers messages. The owl delivers. Yeah. It's the ancient mythology right here, right now, in our modern time. Right. It's exactly perfect. And J.K. Rowling has OWL, owl, right in her name, but I don't think that means anything.
I had to pop this up story from Guy Merritt because it speaks to exactly what we're talking about here. And he writes, I lost a pet and asked her to give me a sign that she was all right. At about the same moment, my wife gasped and said, oh my God, look at that owl. And there was a huge owl on a wire a few feet away. The chat is going crazy, Mike.
Pardon?
Yeah.
The chat is going crazy.
This is very common. So that fellow's story, I mean, he summed it up in a sentence or two. I've heard that story mostly, so here, I'll tell a story. This is a story that happened to me personally. My mom died a decade ago. Wow, what's the date today? It would have been 10 years and a week ago today. My mom passed away, and she had been suffering terribly from Alzheimer's, and so it was a blessing. But I was on one side of the bed holding her hand, and my sister was on the other side holding her hand as she took her last breath. It was terribly, terribly sad. But at the same time, it was like, it felt like a really powerful, important experience to have as a person. Really, really. And it was, and she had been suffering, so it was a relief in many ways. It was sad, but it was a relief. And so this was at 3 a.m. So the next day, like me, my brother and sister, my sister lived in North Carolina, or lives in North Carolina, and my mother was at an assisted living facility just down the road from her. So we were all in North Carolina, and we had been up all night, and we were trying to deal with all the issues. So come evening time, we were all just fried, just frazzled, emotionally drained. And my brother and sister knew I was looking into the owl stuff at that time. And I would sit around or the breakfast table with them. And I had my laptop, and I'm like, hey, look at this. Here's an owl story. And I'd read it aloud. And it was the same stuff I've been sharing with you. It's the same stuff that fills the owl book. And my sister and brother would look at me like, what is going on? What is going on? I don't get it at all. And my sister was like, this is really interesting, but I don't get it. My brother was a little kind of like, he didn't like it. It unnerved him. And then, so my sister's very best friend from across the street in the neighborhood, her name is Ruthie, came over that night. So we're sitting on the back porch with a glass of wine, and I'm on a couch, and I'm in the middle, and my sister Jeannie is on one side, and my sister Jim is on the other, and I'm in the middle. They're both older. I'm the baby brother. I was like 50 at the time, and then Ruthie, my sister's best friend, Ruthie is this wonderful Southern, soft-spoken, entirely heartfelt, sweet woman, and she says, she waits and she goes, Jim, Jean, Mike, I know there is an afterlife, and I know because of an experience I had with an owl. And right at that moment, my sister literally does this thing where she goes, no, not owl. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. My brother's sitting next to me. My brother looks at me like, what did you do? Did you put her up to this? Did you make her? Did you pay her to say this? And poor Ruthie is like, what did I just say? Like, she's kind of like, what happened? I'm like, Ruthie, like, you don't know it, but I've been doing research about owls and its mystical connection to folklore and myth and even things like UFOs, but I want to hear your story. So she says, when my daddy died, it's very Southern, very proper. When my daddy died, I would walk the nature trail around this neighborhood every day, and I was trying to get rid of the grief. I was trying to deal with the grief and sadness of my father dying, passing on. And every day I would pass an owl. And then one day I was walking past the owl, and it hooted. And she turned around, and she looked at the owl, and she said, are you my daddy?
Aww.
And at that moment, all her grieving disappeared. And she basically said, I'm so honored that such a beautiful animal was the messenger for such important news. Mm-hmm. I know my daddy is fine in heaven because an owl told me. Yeah. And I have got that story over and over and over again in my files. Mostly it's a child who is dealing with, after the death of a parent, and dealing with the grieving. And then the owl shows up as a trigger, but the grieving is lessened or eliminated with the owl sighting. Very consistent stories.
My best friend in life was a contactee as well, and we would go together from time to time. And I found it interesting that her mother was an owl freak. She loved owls. There were owls everywhere in their life. There still is to this day. She had many experiences with owls. And one of the things that blew my mind was she ended up with a live owl that they took care of. They saved it, and it lived with them. And it was a screech owl. They called him Mr. Hoot. And her sister is probably listening to the show because I sent her, because of the content, I sent her a notice to get on. So if you're listening, Linda, I want you to understand why your sister was such a contactee. They had owls constantly around them all the time. We did too. And it just amazes me to hear you talking about all these other people. I knew it was going on, but not to the extent that you're talking, that I just didn't realize that many people had owls in their lives like this. I thought it was like one-offs for us.
Well, so. I think we live in this world where people are cautious to share these mystical experiences.
Yeah.
I think it's lessening so now. I think people are more open to it than they would have been 5 years or 10 years ago. I think things are changing. So,
Yeah.
so I think, and so you, Preston, and you both must get this where people contact you and kind of say like, well, I got a story to tell you, and I've never told my wife, I've never told my boss, I've never told
Yep.
anyone, you know,
He does all the
but I'm
time.
going to
Yeah.
tell you. And then I get this story,
Yeah.
and then oftentimes all I can say is, you know, they'll tell me a story and I can say, well, I have never heard that exact story, but I've heard, and I could share a story that's similar. And I say, but I've heard many stories with the same flavor or mood as that story. And, and, and I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a psychiatrist. So I can't play clinician. I can't offer advice or therapy or anything like that. But it feels like so much healing takes place just by me saying to these people, you are not alone. This story you've shared, many other people have had this experience.
Wow. I have my own owl story, but we do need to take a quick station break. So I want to let everyone know that you are watching The Light Gate. This is episode 15. I am your host, Preston Dennett. My lovely co-host is experiencer Dolly Safran. Our wonderful guest is author, podcaster, experiencer, researcher, ... Mike Clelland. We are streaming live on United Public Radio Network at 107.7 FM in the beautiful city of New Orleans. Also on UFO Paranormal Radio Network 105.3 and several other platforms, Roku, Facebook, and YouTube. And yep, that's the station break. So thank you all. Keep those comments and questions coming in chat because I'm going to try to get to them all. But Mike, I want to share my own owl story.
Please, yes.
Because, you know, it fits right in. And it kind of, I'll preface it with, when I was a little kid, we did have a screech owl who would hang out on the telephone pole right next to our house all the time. And I had a big family. There was 8 of us. We'd all go out on the porch and just stare at this thing. And it was a weird special event. And it kind of brought us together in a weird way. And I've always had a little bit of a mystical bent. I thought there's something to this. But never really, you know, I certainly became a researcher at one point and started hearing stories that would sort of bring together owls and UFOs and screen memories, but owls in general. I've got a few stories of those, but in 2018, I think it was 2018, it could have been 2019, November, I was in my backyard and I'm like, show yourselves, you darn UFOs. I'm writing all these books. I haven't had a sighting in years. I want to see you. I know you're out there. Mind you, this is in Reseda. This is outside of LA, the San Fernando Valley. There's 2 million people there. It is densely populated. And so I'm just kind of looking up there. I'm like, show yourselves. I know you can do it. I know you're out there. And sure enough, this big bright light flashed. Then it went off. I'm like, wow, that was pretty good. Not quite good enough. It was ambiguous. And I want more. And at that moment, this owl came right over my head. I get chills just talking about it because this was not a normal owl. I mean, my impression was this thing was huge, totally silent, came so low. And this is I've never seen an owl there. I lived there 10 years. Never have I seen an owl. This is not an area where an owl would be. But even now, yeah, it gave me chills at the time. And I'm like, okay, that's good enough. Thank you. And I got that feeling because every now and then you want a little bit of a hello.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, that's my owl story.
Well, so just that is perfect. That is absolutely perfect in the sense that like it's so clean, right? You are asking to see something. You're getting a direct response. You say not enough, and then the owl shows up. You know what? I've equated the owl as, you know, on your keyboard you have the exclamation point, right? So it's just a keyboard. The keyboard's nothing. The keyboard's like this totally neutral thing, but you can use the keyboard, and if you want to emphasize something in a sentence, at the end of the sentence you push the exclamation point and you emphasize something. The keyboard is meaningless, right? It's just a tool. The exclamation point changes the entire tone of the sentence. That's what I think of the owl. The owl is the keyboard in a way. And so, but it is doing something. It is the exclamation point in the end of the sentence. It is showing up and in adding that power to an event in a way that other animals, if a bunny rabbit ran in front of you, it wouldn't have been the same thing, right? So
Right.
an owl has this mystique and a power and a long lineage of myths and folklores and so that's perfect. That's just perfect. Yeah.
Yeah. And I know Dolly has an owl story, and I'm hoping, because I asked her before the show, the school bus one.
Yeah.
Oh yes.
I lived in Pine Mountain, Georgia, up on Pine Mountain itself in the park, the FDR State Park. So I had 5 acres, and my whole backyard was that whole park. And I would go sit out on my porch at night, and I drove a school bus back then because I wanted same hours as my daughter going to school. And I would have to drive through the mountain up there and back into my dirt driveway to get up to the property because we had automatic gate and it wasn't safe to pull in forward and turn around and come out. So I backed it in pretty tight. And as I was coming up the street, this turkey flew right across my windshield. And I'm looking around, I'm going, what the heck? And in my mind, I'm hearing something gathering around me. And I said, well, if we're being visited today, a turkey is not the way to go. And the second I said that to myself, boom, this owl just went, and it looked at me as it flew by. It went, hey, how you doing? And I was like, oh my God. And I was like, oh my God. And so I backed in, and I was real rattled by it. So backing in at that moment was really treacherous for me to do. And I got out and I walked to the porch and I sat in the rocking chair. We have like a swing porch meet, and looked out and I said, well, if you're there, show yourself. And I hear, like that. And boop, there he was. And I was like, okay. And then there was another one and another one and another one and another one. And they started flying over the house. I went, well, I'm being visited tonight. How about that? Because they knew they were there. And it just blew my mind.
The same thing. You were asking for proof of the UFO thing, but you were getting an owl.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah, I got a turkey first, but then I got the owls. Yeah.
There's a researcher in the field. I will not use this person's name, but this person had a freaking doozy of an owl and UFO story where this person was outside on like an outdoor restaurant and heard an owl.
Yeah.
And looked around. Didn't see it, and looked straight up, and there was a flying saucer directly above, or like a craft of some sort that was way up high.
Wow.
This person. So I'm not. I won't say any more than that. So, and I'm not. But if you know, so it's a person that's well known in the field. So
that's amazing.
That's kind of a minor story compared to somehow weird the stories get.
I like this story from Sassy Cindy because I just collected a crow story, which is not an owl, but it's similar. She says, I have a crow that showed up 3 years ago on my big lawn here in Ontario. The crow came back every year with their babies. They talk telepathically. I saw a show on crows. They're very smart.
Very smart, yeah. Owls are, I want to be careful to say this because I don't want to hurt any owls' feelings, but owls are not the smartest bird. Parrots and ravens are incredibly smart. And owls are very...
we say at the zoo. Not so much. That's how we say it. Just not so much.
But they they do have the ability. They have really strong evolutionary
instincts
traits.
Are right dead on. Yes, they are very good at what they do.
We have a story. Yes, please.
When I was working at the zoo, it was our family zoo, so I lived there. And
it's a family zoo.
Yeah. It's
so you are Snow White. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and we had owls, and we were one of the other keepers had the owls. That was hers. I was mostly cats and other things. And I was watching her. She was spraying them down for a bath. And I'm looking at this scene and I'm realizing, oh my God. And she's like, what are you looking at? And I said, part the feathers for me. What the heck's going on under there? Okay. And then I realized that owls have little round bodies like this, and their head is just above the body, and their legs account for 80% of them.
Yeah, they look like Inspector Gadget.
With a little round, that's exactly it. And they're so dignified when they're dry and all fluffy. But when he was wet and all legs, he just looked at me like, yes, so it was just hysterical. And he made a funny noise at me when I was staring at him, like, cut it out. This is how I am, And then I went on a quest after that. Do all owls look like that? Yes, they do. Every last one of them. They
So
all have that body type. Yeah.
So when you hold an owl, everyone says the same thing. Oh, it's much lighter than I thought.
Right.
So the feathers, they have this big, fluffy, feathery body, and they have special feathers. So you can take your finger and poke the owl's tummy, and your finger goes like this far into the
Way in
feathers
deep.
before you
Yes.
touch the body. And
Yes.
it's those fluffy feathers that dampen their sound in flight. So
That's
those
exactly
are
right.
serving a purpose to make that's their silent flight comes from the
They
feathers.
fascinate the
If you
crap out
can't-
of me.
you
They
can't-
really do.
Yeah. So you can't do that with any other birds, really.
Yeah, we would always get so excited when we were kids and we'd find owl feathers because they're the best of all the feathers.
Yeah.
My sister was
absolutely
a big feather collector. We had lots of owls around when we were kids. I grew up in an area with a lot of wildlife, but it was always a pleasure to see an owl.
So,
It's more
Preston,
than it-
as far as this is like something that I point out in my talks and stuff like so I did a talk and I have a big slide. So there's one guy here's a guy Derek. He saw an owl. The owl flew off, and then basically a triangle shaped craft like flew right over him, totally silent. And I use that as an example. It's one of the first stories I got, And then when I talked to Derek, he said, I had this owl thing, and then I had the UFO show up, and then I saw another UFO a little while later, and then I had these dreams, and they were kind of these dreams of being like floated out of my bed and through the wall, and then I had a spiritual awakening. And I'm like, so I just kind of kept my ear open, and people would talk to people, oh yeah, then I this and that. No, I had a spiritual awakening or a Kundalini awakening, or I had I became, one woman like became a Buddhist monk, So, and then. So I had a slide in my show, which I still in. So I do public talks and at conferences and stuff like that. And one of the slides is I just click the button and it says spiritual awakening. And then I talk about, this is what I'm seeing as a pattern. And I remember being at a conference and being so like, is that right? Am I out of line to put the spiritual awakening thing in? And I was like, I could take it out, right? So it's just it's on my PowerPoint thing, and you just take a button and you delete and I was like, I should probably take that out because I'm really not sure. And this person comes up to me and says, Mike, I'm really glad to talk to you. I had this owl show up I saw this UFO thing happen. Oh my God, it led to a spiritual awakening. And he said that to me as I was thinking. I didn't say it out loud. I was thinking, I need to delete this from my show. And then I was like, I guess I'm keeping that in.
Oh, you should-
Yeah, well, it came hand in hand for me, the whole UFO thing and spiritual awakening.
yeah. So I'm dying to ask you this. So you're about 40. All right, what's the progression of your employment in life? What sort of things have you done in life?
Okay. This is so I went to I didn't go to college after high school. I worked for 1 year at an ad agency in my little town of Southfield, Michigan. I would ride my bicycle to this ad agency. I was a very skilled illustrator. So I would do drawings for this ad agency. They would have pre-production drawings for TV commercials. And they did a lot of funny commercials with cartoons in them. So I was like, that's my style. So then when I went to New York City and went to college at NYU, and it was really expensive. And I wanted to I was working. I quit college and got a job in advertising. And then let me tell you, I lived in a pretty nice apartment for a while in New York City and in my 20s. And I ate at a lot of nice restaurants. There was a lot of money and it was hated it. I hated it. And so I quit and I moved out west and became a ski bum
Wow. Okay.
I was going to do it for one winter and ended up staying 25 years. So, and then, but in that time, I started doing illustrations for magazines and books, and that's when Dennett, Preston, you said that I had like 40 books. Some of those books I just did. Most of those books I was the illustrator. Someone else wrote them, but so many of those books are just my illustrations. I didn't write them, but my name's on the Amazon list like that. So I did a ton of books with cartoons in them for years,
Very
and
cool.
then the thing happened with Kristen in the mountains, and my life was going along in this direction, and it went in this direction, and like all that stuff disappeared. Like just all of a sudden my life changed, and I was like, and I started writing the books, and that would have been so I started writing the books when I was about 50. So I'd been up 20 to 30. I was working in New York City doing advertising work. 30 to 50, I was doing outdoor illustration work, and I was also working in the mountains doing guided trips to Alaska, and I worked on Denali, and I did a lot of ski instruction and rock climbing instruction and stuff like that, and big ambitious wilderness trips where we would go out for 30 days in the mountains. Wow. Yeah. So and then since then, so 50 to 60, I've been writing books. So in the last 10 years, I've written 4 books, sort of big fat books too, fatter than they should be.
Right.
So
okay, so you're if I'm getting this right about you, you're very much an environmentalist than an outdoors person. And did you advocate for that? Environmental.
You know, it was really interesting. So what I advocated for was to appreciate the wilderness. Like, so the way I would say it, and this is, you know, because I would give the talk you'd spend a month with a small group of students in no contact with anyone else, a month. Someone would come in and deliver the groceries, often by airplane or horseback, every 10 days. So, and I would say, like, I taught you to light the stove. I taught you to use a map. And I feel I did my very best to teach at a high level. I don't care if you ever light a stove again in your life. I don't care. I don't care if you ever use a map again in your life. I don't care. What I do care about is that you recognize that the wilderness environment that we have been in is of enormous value, not just to you as an individual, but to the collective, to mankind itself. Oh yeah, I am still very passionate about that.
Everybody goes, when you have contact, everybody takes a different path. And some of us are environmentalists, some of us are animal protectors, some of us are clean up, quit poisoning ourselves, that kind of thing. But they all go into some sort of service. So I see you as an environmental service person. You were teaching that.
ETs love that's who they contact. People who are doing good work for humanity and the planet in some way.
Right.
So which came first? Like, did the UFO contact turn me into an environmentalist, or was I already predisposed to be an environmentalist, and then the beings met me? My guess is it's a little more halfway somehow that all meets.
I think it's a two-way street.
I think it's not as simple.
So here's
as that.
a question from Penny Rummel, which is a good question. Mike, do owls still play a big part of your life now? Any new experiences you had with them?
Oh, I see owls all the time. People around me recognize it too. Like, they're like, "What is going on with you?" Like, so yeah, I see owls all the time. So the role they play in my life now, you know, how to say it, I don't need any proof. Like, I don't need to see owls. Like, what is it? Like, I'm already like on board. I'm fully devoted to collecting these stories. And so I do feel like I'm hearing people's stories. I'm archiving these people's stories. I'm doing my very best to keep good records of these stories. And I'm flooded with these stories. You know, I used to get about one a day, one good owl story a day. Last week, there were a few days last week, I got 5 good stories in a day. I can't keep up. It breaks my heart that I can't reply in any meaningful way to the folks that are reaching out to me. I tried a form letter. I hated doing that. But I have to, I can't, it's like walking uphill in sand. At the same time, I'm trying to see the pattern in these stories. So they're still playing a role in my life. Absolutely. But it's me as an archivist of other people's stories, which I feel is a very vital, important role.
I just interviewed not just interviewed, her stories out in my new book. She's this amazing lady who saw tree spirits and ghosts and all kinds of stuff, out-of-body experiences, just the full spectrum of paranormal. Ended up marrying into a family of Native Americans who had a huge tradition about owls. They did not like them. They thought of them as harbingers of, bad juju coming at them. But she had this amazing owl story where she said, I need to tell you this. I don't know if it's related, but we were driving one day, me and my 2 kids, and we came upon this owl in the center of the road. I'm like, okay. She says, it wasn't an owl. I'm like, what do you mean it wasn't an owl? She says, it was over 4 feet tall.
Oh.
Now, I don't know how big owls can get. I should have looked this up before the show, but she swore up and down, this was not a normal owl. And it was staring into her eyes. The kids were freaking out, and she felt almost entranced by it. She says it was 4 feet tall if it was 5. And at some point she started to get really alarmed and edged her car towards it. It wouldn't move. It wouldn't move. She came right up to her car, and she's like, well, I don't know what to do at this point. I don't want to run it over. And finally, it just gave her one long stare, and off it went. She's like, Preston, I don't know what this was, but the family I live in, they hate these owls, and this one came at me so hard. So I don't know exactly how to interpret it, but it sort of falls into this here.
This is the 4 foot tall owl is like, I've heard that story 500 times.
There are
How
actually
big
owls
owls
that
are
are
they?
no, they
Owls,
can
so-
be 4 feet tall.
No,
they
no,
can.
no.
They're barn owls that are
Nope.
large.
Nope, they can't. There's no owl in the world that's 4 foot tall. If they get to
Really?
27 inches, there's. So here's what I did. I made a cardboard owl. Just cut it out of cardboard. I measured 4 feet. I
Okay.
took an owl outline, like a shape of an owl, sitting,
Okay.
and measured a 4 foot tall owl, and I made it out of cardboard. And when I have it, sometimes it's hard to take to some conferences. I would carry it out on stage and set it on stage. This is what people are reporting: a 4 foot tall owl. There is. I've talked to biologists and really looked this up. 27 inches is
There you go.
about as big as it's going to get.
Which is under
3 feet.
Well, that's barely over 2 feet.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little over 2 feet. We had barn owls that were literally, I saw for myself, I know, and I don't know who this biologist is, but I'll argue with him until the sun dies. Okay, because we had over 3 foot owls in our barn. They were barn owls. It was in Miami and Florida. They were monstrously big, and I think it has to do with the food supply, how big they get from chicks up.
Okay.
These owls were eating things, tremendous had food supply, like you would believe. They were eating every rodent and snake and everything on our area, and they grew tremendously huge. At the zoo, I have seen owls at our zoo, and they have plenty of food at the zoo, wild owls sitting up in our trees, and we looked up and we made bets on how tall they were, and one of them down near topped out, at 3.5 feet when it hit the ground. So this biologist doesn't know what they're talking about.
Okay.
I will argue until the sun dies.
Okay.
That is not true. Absolutely not true. 27 inches is a very low estimate, and it has to do with food supply. The more food they have, the bigger they get. That's a fact. Everything gets bigger with good food. Everything.
Here's another story about owls, which is kind of cool because it involves Clifford Stone, who's very well known in this field. This is from CT Guitar Guy. And he writes, Clifford Stone, a military whistleblower who actually talked about, he was on crash retrievals mostly, but he talked about how while working as a security guard at school, the local kids said they wanted to see an alien, and a 3-foot white owl appeared. So there you go. There's that weird ET.
Yeah, there
owl
it is.
connection.
That you ask for one thing and you get the other. Yeah, so they blend in.
So-
Just like even writing, like just even when I type, I've mistyped UFO and I type owl, right? The 3 letters, and that's happened to me so many times. Just so that even simply typing it, I get mixed up between the two. So that's very common for you to ask to see an alien and then to see an owl. And I mean, you basically said it too in your story where you said, oh, that light flash in the sky wasn't enough, and then an owl appeared.
So what about, going through your book, it's not just about UFOs. It's just interesting owl stories all the time. But, owls do appear in screen memories, and that's just peripheral to all of this. Because, that's a big part of the UFO experience, but it's so much deeper than that. Your book just goes so much farther than just the whole screen memory connection, but it touches on that as well. Would you say that that's a fair assessment?
Oh, I certainly addressed the screen memory thing. It's interesting because I had to address the screen memory thing early on in the book. Once you hear, so the screen memory, people who are listening to this must be up to speed on this, but the implication is that, for instance, that 4-foot tall owl in the road might have been, so in the story, so I've talked to hypnotherapists like Yvonne, and I knew Bud, and I knew Leo, and John Carpenter has like a pretty good story of actually having a witness under hypnosis say, like, basically seeing the gray alien, and the gray alien will say, you will remember us as an owl. So that kind of thing shows up in the lore. Hypnosis is kind of a fuzzy thing, but the implication is that the 4-foot tall owl in the road is actually the gray alien somehow putting a screen thought into the mind of the observer. Whether
It's a hypnotic suggestion. They can do that. When they contact you, you can be in a state people don't realize this, but fear can put you in a hypnotic state just like that. You disassociate. And when you're disassociating from yourself in fear, they can talk directly to your consciousness and say, you know what, you're so scared. Let's see me as an owl. And they take the suggestion and they run with it. And it's one of their favorite things to use on people is just see me as an owl. That makes you feel good. Go for it.
Well, and it's not just owls, but it's deer and
right.
firemen and
there's a lot
clowns
of
and
animals,
raccoons so
the least innocuous types, though, they don't ever put a grizzly bear memory or things like that. Wouldn't be a common thing for them to see. It's always an animal that can do them no harm, really, make them feel good. And that's what they do.
Yeah. So there's but it's interesting that the two most commonly reported animals are owls and deer.
Yeah.
As a screen memory, and then below that are a long list of other things like raccoons and squirrels,
stuff like that. Squirrels,
and or big squirrels, like 4 foot tall squirrels, which is
I know.
I would argue so this, I don't have any proof for this, right? So this is what I like. For me, this line of speculation, what I say is the puzzle pieces click together really nice, right? You got this messy puzzle on the table. Like, what's going on with this puzzle? And it clicks together really nicely in my mind. For myself, doesn't make it true, but my like a fruitful avenue of speculation is that the owl and deer are both rich with lore, rich with folklore.
Oh, sure.
I mean, the goddess Diana had a deer as her companion, and the goddess Athena, her sister, had an owl as a companion. So the owl and deer are embedded into the Western mindset as far as I think it carries
DNA memory with it. I really do. We have
like an archetypal memory. Sure. Yes. Sure. An archetypal memory. Yeah. And that's one of the things I argue that as far as like people ask me why owls, and I should have really good answers to this. I don't. I can give you a fuzzy answer that maybe, but I would say that the owl is an archetype. So when an owl shows up, it is showing up for archetypal reasons so that you can tap into it. So it's the exclamation point on the keyboard. So it's not just owls and UFO contact. I should be able to do this list. Owls and synchronicity, very commonly reported together. Owls and psychedelics, most often mushroom. People take mushrooms in a ritual setting.
I hear that a lot. The eyes,
Owls and shamanic initiation. People going through the initiation process of becoming a shaman. There's still communities of shaman around. It's well understood within those communities that owls show up around the time of initiation. I've got lots of stories like that. Owls and meditation. I've got lots of stories. No UFOs in the story. Someone's meditating, and then sometimes they're outside, sometimes they're inside. They open their eyes, and there's, let's say, an owl in the window looking in at them as they open their eyes. Very common.
Wow.
And then there's one more, owls and death. So yeah, we talked about that earlier. Owls and death.
I'm part Cherokee, and there was just a thing up there. Owls in the Cherokee Nation are very important to the Cherokee people because they represent the upper realms. Like heaven, going to heaven. And when my great grandmother was full-blooded Cherokee, and when I was very small, she told me that the shaman, or the medicine man of the troop, would send messages with the owls to family that had departed on the other side, or send them out to ask a question for answers or for help or for medical healing. I mean, it was amazing. Owls were very important to them. They had lots of rituals involving owls. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's connected to the medicine man, the totem. So we live in a society now where we don't have, there's still societies and cultures within the United States that are on reservations and stuff that have someone playing that role, but collectively we're adrift. We don't have that. So people are coming to me where if someone had a powerful mystical experience with an owl in a tribe, let's say 500 years ago in South Dakota, you would just walk to the teepee at the edge of the village where the shaman lived and say, like, what does this mean? The shaman wouldn't ask, which direction was that owl flying? Do you have any radar returns from the local airport? Can you draw a picture of the owl? They would already have these things. So they would have within their culture, they would have a lineage of the folklore of the owl. And in the tribe over the next hill, in the next valley, might have a slightly different folklore, but I would argue that there would be a similar, let's say, a similar vibe or a similar
The commonalities were
commonalities would
profound.
be strong.
Yes, very profound. Yes.
Yeah. Well, the people in chat are saying, yes, this has happened to me. Richard's describing seeing what he looked like a 6-foot owl.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just Googled and I found one of the largest owl reports is the great horned owl. That we had those in our barn, and this one was over 42 inches tall.
Okay.
And
Okay,
so I'm telling you, they can reach 4 feet. No joke.
Yep.
This is a big animal, and I was taught from other zookeepers who had owls that it's their diet. If they have a really rich, good diet from very young, from chick up, they grow immensely huge, especially the great horned. They're the biggest ones. So, yeah.
You had one story in your book, which I thought was just amazing, where this guy was driving along and an owl flew right along his car and touched him with its wingtip.
Yes. Oh, I'll tell that story. Yeah. This is, I mean, to tell the story correctly it's like, oh my, this is one of the story where the threads just go everywhere. And it's so this fellow contacted me. He saw me at a UFO conference. The very first time I spoke on a stage was at the International UFO Congress in 2014. So 9 years ago. And he came up afterwards and goes, I've got an owl story for you. So let's go to the bar. Come follow me. So I went to the bar and sat with him, and he said, and he was a great storyteller. He just kind of started. So he started his story. He said, I was a friend of mine had this book, and it was How to Find Your Spirit Animal. It's called The 7 Feathers.
Cool. Yeah.
And I think it's from the Northwest tribe. I have the book. It's in storage right now. So he said, it's How to Find Your Spirit Animal. So he was reading the book, and he was working in the forestry department, and he was you go through and you count trees in the forest. So he's like walking through the trees and he's counting trees, and he says, I need to take a nap. Oh, I'm tired. I'm taking a nap. So he reads the book, and he gets to the part where it says, this is your How to Find Your Spirit Animal. Oh, this is the part. I'm tired. And he lies down in the sun and sets the book on his heart with the page on How to Find Your Spirit Animal on his heart.
Okay.
And he falls asleep. And he wakes up, and there's this horrible smell right in front of his face. He keeps his eyes closed, and it's right in front of his face. He keeps his eyes closed, stays totally still, and he hears this thud, 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 thud. And this big thing walks away, and he opens his eyes. A grizzly bear walking away from him.
Wow.
And he's like, How to Find Your Spirit Animal on his heart. Grizzly bear touches his nose, right?
Right.
So this fellow, he had to drive someone somewhere, and he was reading the book. So he had the same book, the exact same book, the same physical copy, the same book. His friend says, you need to read this book. And he gets to the part where it's like, oh, here's the part where you find your owl or find your totem animal. Mm-hmm. And he gets to the page, and the knock, guy's in the door and says, hey, can you give me a ride? I need to pick up something from the other town. It's like, I need to use your van. It's like, well, I'll drive you. So he gets in his van, and he's driving, and he's got the book on the dashboard opened. Like take the book and you open it on the dashboard. So it's on the dashboard. He's driving, and he's driving at night. I think this is in Montana. He's driving at night, and they're driving past this lake, and he looks out on the lake, and on the headlights, something white in the head thing. And then this owl comes up and flies right along the thing, and the owl touches his temple.
Yeah.
That's beyond.
Flies off. And so he says, he's got the book on the dashboard, opened How to Find Your Spirit Animal. Owl flies up, touches his temple, and he looks at me and he says, when I was a kid, I was going blind in this eye, and the doctors didn't know what it was. And there was a lot of issues, and they thought it was cancer. So they did brain surgery on me, and they opened my brain, and inside my skull was an undeveloped embryo.
Whoa.
And I had always known that I had a sister, but I never met her. I always knew I had a sister. I could talk telepathically. I've always been able to talk telepathically with my sister.
That's amazing.
And see this? You go, see this scar right here?
Yeah.
This is where the surgery was. This is where they took my
amazing.
sister. They took my sister out of my brain.
Was he able to talk to her again after that?
He did. It was changed. The
Good.
communication changed.
Okay.
But he said,
Yeah. He was just still in contact. Yeah.
He said, this is right where the owl touched me.
Wow.
right where my sister came out of my skull.
I'm really weird. I would have said, "Give that to me. I want to cremate it and put it in a cup."
I'm not sure what happened. He was a little boy
Wow.
when it happened. So he
Oh,
was a little
wow.
boy when he had the operation, but he's had, wow, has he had some powerful mystical experiences.
That's amazing. I have a question for you. Have you found your spirit animal? Did you try to
Me?
do that? Yes.
I don't think I need to ask. I kind of know what it is.
Oh, okay. What would it be?
Well, it would be the owl, I think. I mean, I
Okay.
might be wrong, but I mean, I think it might be. I mean, so
Yeah. Mine, I found out when I was young. It's a buffalo. And it got presented to me in full bloom when I was older and my daughter was young. I up in Pine Mountain, there's a wild animal safari up there, and I worked there, and they had buffalo. And I was used to do tours and tell everybody about all the animals and stuff. And one day I was transferring people on the bus that I was on. It went dead in the middle of the park, and we had to bring other rangers out there to guard us while we transferred from one bus to the other to get them out. And as we were coming out, I had a cattle prod in my hand, okay, to bump off the Watusi that were out there. And I turned around and looked because I could hear something behind me, and standing dead behind me was one of the buffalo. It was guarding me, and everybody was like looking at it. Do you realize there's a buffalo behind you? And I'm like, yes. Shh. And don't say anything. And when everybody made it to the other bus, I just looked at it and said, well, I'm on my way now. And it followed me to the door of the bus. And I went up the gangway and I was going to shut the door, and it was looking at me in the door. And I went, thank you. And he went, you're welcome. It nodded at me and walked off. And I was like, oh my God, that is my spirit animal. Oh my God, it really is true. There was no doubt in my mind it's the buffalo. It just was totally weird. I also have a totem, and it's even freakier. It's a leopard. A black leopard is my totem, and I don't know how those two work together, but I've got them, one and the other one.
Mm-hmm.
So there's definitely stuff going on with the animal kingdom. I was once really depressed. Yeah. Someone had let me down really bad. Someone I trusted had not done what they said they were going to do. I don't want to get too into it, but I was really upset because it was important to me, and I was just raving, mad, and depressed about it. And this hawk came and landed on the balcony where I was sitting, lamenting, on the little banister there, about 2 feet away. This was a big red-tailed hawk, and just looked at me. And my emotions just went whoosh. I'm like, okay, you know what? Not an owl, but a hawk. So similar.
Those kind of stories are so common, and I think people are afraid to share them. And it's been an honor for myself to be able to collect stories like that. Most of mine deal with owls, but I've got plenty of hawk stories and hummingbird stories and raven stories and other stories. Here, can I tell a quick one that like, there's no UFO in this story, but it does have everything to do with the lore. So a Native American fellow gets a hold of me, and he was raised in the Huron tribe, which is in Michigan. And I didn't know there was a reservation. I grew up in Michigan, and I didn't know there was a reservation there. I looked up on the map, and it looks like a neighborhood. It's just like a little rectangle. It's called the Huron Tribal Reservation, and there's forests and stuff around it, but it's much different than I would have expected to see how it looked on a map. And he said, so I was a kid and I had a kite. I was 12 years old and I had this kite that I loved, and I would fly it, and I had a special ball, like the thing that can string. I could control the kite the way the string system was. And he said something had never happened to me before. This huge gust of wind comes up. The string and everything gets pulled from my hand, and the kite flies way up in the sky. And I watch it go off into the forest, and it disappeared. And he got his friend. He said, I got to find my kite. That kite. I love that kite. We got to go find it. So they went into the forest, and then they looked around. And then up in the top of a tree, they said, there it is. There's the kite. So they ran to the tree, and at the base of the tree was an owl that had been wrapped up in the string.
Oh, wow. Shoot. Yeah.
So they said, oh, this thing's going to die unless it was like, so they got an adult, and the adult came with a pair of scissors, and the adult helped them snip it out, and then they took the owl and nursed it back to health. And I said, when the question I asked was, are you a shaman? And he said, in a word, yes.
Yes. Yeah.
So I said, oh man, you've grown up on an Indian reservation. You have that experience, like. And the reason I asked, are you a shaman, is because I had heard so many other stories that had been told to me by other people who are either studying shamanism or were in a shamanic apprenticeship, or had like their own working knowledge of being a shaman, or they were shamans directly. Yeah. So that's like when he told me that story, it's like,
Amazing.
are you a shaman? So like I don't ask that to many people, and so that and he had a really rough time. I don't want to give away too much, but he had a rough time in his role as a shaman, because I think there was a lot of, anyway, he had a very difficult time with it. Yeah.
When you have an esoteric ability, and you lead that life, it draws good and bad. You're under the influence of both things. You're walking in between worlds when you're doing that, and so you become a target as well as a light, in being a light. And that's what shamans are. They're lights in the darkness. They provide people with many, many things. And the dark can really get to some people, and they have to learn how to repel it or tell it to go away. That's one of the most critical things you learn as a shaman. You don't let yourself be destroyed by the dark, because it will come after you. It really will. Negative influences.
Well, here's a story. I just want a little statement from Deanna Chaffin, which relates to UFOs and owls. She says, while outside doing a CE5 meditation with family and friends, my son said he saw an owl that was the size of the roof. That he tried to tell everyone, and none of us acknowledged him, but it freaked him out. Yeah, the one I saw, I was looking it up like Dolly was. I'm like, I'm going to find out how tall owls get. I could only find the wingspan. But yeah, their wingspan is like 6 feet, doesn't really cover the entire roof. So I'm wondering about these owls that people are seeing.
Well, the very first saucer that I remember seeing as a child looked like an umbrella. So if I can see an umbrella, they can see an owl. Okay. I had just seen Mary Poppins, and that was at the top of my memory at the time. I was only 5.5 years old, and I saw a giant umbrella coming down, literally.
Oh, how interesting. So you were my sense
they were
is that they
keeping
can
me from panicking is what they were doing. I was outside. I was laying on the ground, looking up through the trees, watching the clouds go by, and I saw this umbrella coming down over me. I was fixated on it because I had just seen Mary Poppins, and I was looking for the handle with the parrot on it. And I went from that scene to being on board with them. And I know they did that, because if I had seen a real craft, I would have panicked. I would have run screaming. So
that seems to be one of the reasons they would have a screen memory, is to keep you from, even though an umbrella is absurd, but if you had just seen Mary Poppins, it almost feels like they did a quick,
they tapped my memory.
They tapped into your memory and said, oh, let's just pull out just the right thing. And how they do that, I don't, so
I know, it was amazing.
Yeah, crazy stuff. I remember this is not quite an owl story, but kind of relates to it peripherally. These girls were driving to work one day. They carpooled and were just in an absolute panic. I'm like, what is wrong? They said a bird flew into our car and died. And they thought this was a bad sign. They're Latin, they're like, this is a bad omen.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I think you mentioned the story about that with an owl.
That was the fiction book. I won't give anything away, but that happens in the fiction book. So
yeah, well, here, let me pull that up, and we only have like 15 minutes less.
Oh, we're getting close.
So
yeah,
I want to pull that in. Tell us about your novel.
Oh, so the novel. So what happened was I kind of finished the third book, and people would say like, you're like, hey, are you going to write another book on owls? And I'm like, okay. They basically said, can you write another book on owls? And I'm like, I could write 50 books on owls, but it'd always be the same story. It'd be just the same story over and over again. Essentially the same story. Like, it would be like, if I didn't make my point, you stack the 3 books, you stack my 3 owl books on top of each other. It's 1,000 pages.
Wow.
Like if I can't get the point across in 1,000 pages, like it's not doing me any good to write another book on owls. So I kind of had this idea of doing a fiction book a long time ago as a comic book, and then I kind of put it away. And then when I finished the third of the series of nonfiction books, I was like, ooh, that comic book that I've been thinking about, I'm just going to do it as a novel. And that was, oh my God, it was hard work. Like it's one thing to do a nonfiction, because Preston, you have like all those beautiful nonfiction books where they're like where you have you can talk to the people. You can get you can transcribe the conversation, and you have a wonderful starting point. But not with a fiction. Wow, is it hard? So what I wanted to do was imbue the story with something, I've used the term already, with the same flavor and mood, right? You talk to people, you hear the same story, you hear a similar story, you hear some, it's like, oh, that's not the same story, but wow, does it have a similar mood? And I say something in the beginning of the book where like the I don't tell any story exactly, but I certainly use the stories from my files as well as my own personal experiences
Oh, that's neat.
for
That's
the
cool.
story.
Yeah.
And so like it was funny because I've told people like, there's some weird stuff. This is a weird story. And
Yeah.
and I would kind of say, the weirdest stuff in it really happened. So people could come back and what about this part in the book? Did like this thing? I'm like, oh, that happened to me. That happened to me. That happened to me. So so it was a really challenging thing to write, and it was so rewarding to put it out. So people have been really happy with it, and I don't want to read the reviews on Amazon. It's super easy to do. You can get to it in a couple
Okay,
clicks.
that's where your books are on Amazon.
Yeah, and all of them are Amazon. Really easy to get. Yeah,
Excellent.
so they're all self-published.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's awesome. Okay, well, do you have a website?
I do have a website. It is MikeClelland.com. All one word. Mike Clelland is Mike, last name Clelland, Clelland. And if you can't remember that, just Google UFO owl. I'm the very first thing that comes up, and about the next 25 things under that.
Okay.
So, and then once again, if anyone wants to get a hold of me, I apologize in advance. I might not be able to get back to you in a meaningful way right away, but I do read every letter, and I take these letters very seriously. I would love to hear your stories. Yeah. So.
That's lovely. That's awesome. Now, Preston usually asks this, but I'm going to remember to ask it this time. What is your favorite event that somebody's told you about? Which one drew the most emotional response out of you that you learned about somebody?
The story I told about the owl touching the fellow's helmet, the temple.
Okay.
Wow, that was
Okay.
heavy. That was really, like, that was
That's
just the
amazing to
whole.
me.
We were sitting together at a bar at a UFO conference in this dark room and in the back, and just that was a powerful story for me. But here's one that I can tell quickly. Like, I got a lot of stories, but some of them take so long to tell. They're so beautiful, but they take so long to tell. This is one that I can tell quickly, where a woman contacted me, and she said, started her letter, "I am a happy grandmother." And then she said, "When I was a girl, a teenager, I was terribly depressed." Now, I'm going to say this too. I have a history of clinical depression. I haven't had any issues in over a decade, and I'm totally grateful for that. I don't expect to have it in any more others. Anyway, but so serious clinical depression is something I understand.
Okay.
So this woman says, I was very depressed, and I was going to kill myself. And I had a spot picked out on the side of the road, in the side of the road in the forest, and it was a little turnout, and I had a spot picked out, and I took my parents' car, and I had a hose that I was going to take from the tailpipe to bring into the car, and I had a pillow to lie my head on. And so she's driving to the spot, and she's getting ready to turn into the spot. So she's slowing down, and as she's slowing down to turn into the spot where she was planning to die, this owl flies right up to the windshield. And she says it was like this total mystical connection. It felt like time stopped, and the owl just hovered there, and we locked eyes, and then it flew off. And she said, I took it as a sign,
Right.
and I turned around and came home, and my life got better. And
Wow.
so there's a story. I have a lot of stories where owls save people's lives. It's
Right.
usually not that dramatic, but wow, that was just like, there is no way to read that story without coming to the absolutely transparent conclusion that the owl saved her life.
Yeah, I've got stories like that with ET for sure, all the way up
Yeah.
to the same sort of thing. People braced to end their lives, and a gray appeared. This guy was out in the desert, ready to just end it. And the gray appeared, and he says, it voided the suicide, is the words he used.
Say again?
Right.
It voided the suicide.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And I used to think that was just a one-off story. I have a couple of those now where people just at the moment of
Yeah.
considering suicide.
It's
Like,
amazing
an
to
owl
me
shows
that
up.
I guess it's because I've had so much to do with animals my whole life. If you're broadcasting help, I need help, something's wrong, I'm desperate, I'm depressed, or whatever. So a lot of times animals will show up, and we don't know how many people are that close, and an animal has stopped them, just by showing up. And it could be almost anything. And it amazes me that we're so connected to them like that, which we are. You know, they hear
Yeah.
us, we hear them. Your animals in your home hear you, they listen to you.
Oh, yeah.
They empathetically know what you're feeling. And when you're sad, they show up for that as well. When you're happy, they get happy with
Yeah.
you. We're so connected. Like what you did by going out into nature, you were showing people that nature, we are part of that. And animals are that important to us. We should get to know them much better. You know, make a point of going out every day and looking around and seeing what you see. You know, ask the
Yeah.
question, send out the call and see what happens. It would be awesome if they did. You know,
Well, Preston has the story of, it's just like, you know, I want to see proof, and then the flash, no, not enough proof, and then
Right.
the owl.
exactly.
Very, very,
Yeah.
oh boy, that's textbook.
I do have a question that's not quite owl related, but we always say any question is okay. And this is coming from CT Guitar Guy. It's a
Yeah.
question for you, Mike. Given your camping and paranormal experience, what are your thoughts on the missing 411 stories, particularly in national parks and other outdoor areas?
I find him fascinating. David Paulides, I think, is doing really remarkable work. I have never had any kind of experiences that would point towards that, and I've spent a lot of time in the mountains. Not saying that it's not that he's yes. So he's going to be at a conference. I'm going to be in a couple weeks. I'm going to meet him. So he's going to be a conference in. So
Oh,
I
I'd love to be a fan of
I'm going
that.
to be very cautious. I'm very cautious here. This is kind of like peripheral conversation. I never got to finish the conversation, but I basically asked him, like, do you realize, like, do owls show up in your research? And he goes, oh, all the time. And then but he also does Bigfoot research. So I think he might have been implying that owls show up in Bigfoot research.
Yeah, I had a whole hour-long conversation with him about Bigfoot. Very thorough researcher.
Yeah.
Very interesting guy, very intelligent.
Yeah.
But yeah, Chad is filled with all kinds of animals and owl stories. It's really quite interesting.
Definitely.
So we still have a couple of minutes. I'm looking for more questions,
Okay.
but I don't see any. Lots of really nice comments.
Oh, here I'll do a really quick thing that I like to. So I did a hypnosis session in 2018 with Yvonne
Right.
Smith, and wow, this stuff come up, and oh my god! So I'm very cautious. I'm cautious to believe the stuff that comes up under hypnosis. It's a really interesting story. There's a value to having an interesting story, but she asked before I started the hypnosis session, I said, hey, when I'm under, like, ask me about the owls. Like, you know, what's up with the owls? And she said, of course. So we'd go through this whole thing, and I cry, and I swear, and I yell at the world. I get so angry, and all this stuff happened in my session. And then at the end, I kind of calmed down, and then she says, and Mike, what is your connection to owls? And I didn't skip a beat, and I'll just do this whole thing, and it came out almost like poetry. She said, Mike, what is your connection to owls? I said, the owls aren't important. I am an artist, and I understand how people take in an image and a symbol. The owl is a symbol, but the owl isn't important. The owl is the correct symbol for the door. It is the door that is important. The owl is the correct symbol for the door, but the owl is not important. We are on
You hit the
this
head on the
side
nail.
of we are on this side of the door in a
Right.
tight claustrophobic little hallway, and on the other side of the door is an infinite vastness.
Right. That's being psychic. That's awakening. That's
I felt
us
like I channeled.
connecting to our
I
higher
channeled
consciousness.
that. Yeah.
You bet you did. I'll bet you did. That something was talking to you and telling you the truth. Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, with that in mind, we're going to get toward closing. Would like to ask you back again, because now I'm going to buy your new book and I'm going to read it. We're going to have lots more to talk about. I have a feeling. So would you come back again? Can we sit
Absolutely.
one
Absolutely.
day?
Yes. I'm a
Awesome.
huge fan of Preston's work and yeah.
All right.
So,
Well,
and
thank you very
it's
much.
great.
I, Preston, and our entire audience, this has been a treat for us. This has been a wonderful experience talking to
And
you.
it's been
about-
wonderful meeting both of you. Like, again,
Thank you very
talking to
much.
Preston again. Yes. So
Okay, please do, everybody come and see us on the Light Gate again. We're coming from New Orleans at United Public Radio Network at 107.7 FM and the United Paranormal Radio Network at 105.3 FM. Good night, everybody. We love you. Mwah. And we'll talk again soon.
Bye, guys.
good night. Thank you so much.